Well, I was raised 4 miles west of Mount Pleasant on a small farm across the road from my grandfather. My dad was an oil field worker, and I saw him very little because he was always where the oil field was being developed. And that was back near the days of the Depression, and nobody had any money. I tell everybody I repeated the first 4 grades twice because we had a 4-room schoolhouse, and each room had 2 grades in it. So the first and second grade was together, so you heard it for 2 years. Third and fourth was together. I did that for 2 years. And I went to Parish Junior College for 1 year and worked on a college farm and milked cows for my room, board, and tuition. And then went to Commerce and finished there in January of '49. Any of the teachers were willing to sit down and talk to you and work with you on anything you had to say, any problem you had. And one thing that amazed me is I'd never been called Mr. before in my life till I got to Commerce. Every one of the professors called people in their class either Mr. or Ms. I guess that was what was most important, was the way people cared for you. And the way everybody wanted to be helpful.
Agreed.
A professor always had time to talk to you. That's pretty hard to say. There's probably a person that I met in the service. When I was assigned to Army headquarters in Europe, I was assigned to the aide to the Adjutant General. And I was kind of sorry for what I did to him, the way I mistreated him at the first meeting, because I embarrassed him very much. I went in and reported for duty, and we sat down and started talking. He says, "Well, I see you're from Texas." I said, "Yes, sir. About 100 miles east of Dallas, Texas." He says, "Well, I was raised in Texas." I says, "Whereabouts in Texas?" He says, "West Texas." And I says, "Where in West Texas?" He kind of hem-hawed around and didn't want to answer the question. And finally, he said, "Erath County." And I says, "Oh, what town?" And he wouldn't answer me. And I says, "I bet you're from Hogtown." And he looked at me and he says, "How did you ever hear of Hogtown?" He says, "I never want to hear you say that word again in my life." And that's where he was raised. It was called Hogtown because it's a big peanut raising area. And after they harvested peanuts, they turned the hogs into the fields to pick up everything that they missed. And we got talking, and he says, "How did you know about that?" I said, "Well, my mother was from De Leon, which was just a little larger city than that." And he says, "I went to school in De Leon." I says, she said, "What was her name?" I told him. He says, "I knew her." So here's a general in Europe that knew my mother. And he hadn't seen her in 30 or 40 years, I don't guess. And he says, what do you want to do while you're over here? I says, whatever you want me to do, and I want to enjoy it. I want to see as much as possible. He says, well, I'm going to put you to traveling. He says, I think you're intelligent enough to handle some of my duties. And he says, I'm going to give you a temporary rank of lieutenant colonel. When you're out, you can stay in the officers' quarters. You can bump anybody on the plane because I'm priority. And he says, when I got some dealings with some other commands over here, I want you to go and handle them. And I had a top secret clearance, and I would go and do briefings for him. And I was briefing people who've been in the Army 20 and 30 years. And here I was, 23 years old. And I think the confidence that he gave it me probably did more, instill confidence in me and be a mentor than anything that's ever happened. So I started looking for a job, and I found the job as a salesman for Royal Typewriter Company in Dallas. And turned out I was a pretty good salesman. I started there in 1954. And in less than 4 years, I was promoted to Western Regional Sales Manager, covering everything west of the Mississippi for Royal. Then, right as my daughter was born, they moved me to New York as National Sales Manager. At that time, well, I had 97 branch offices and about 150 dealers, and probably 800 or 900 salesmen working under me. And shortly after that, I was given the responsibility for all of the business equipment operations for Linton. And they added Europe to my responsibilities. I'll never forget one time I was at Linton's headquarters in Beverly Hills. I was out there at a meeting, and Tex Thornton, the head of Linton, came in and said, "Can you go to San Juan and give a speech for me tonight?" He says, "I'm supposed to give a speech, and I don't remember what the group was." He says, "I can't make it." I said, "Yeah, you get me there and I'll do it." So he called his secretary and says, "Have we got a plane that he could go in?" She says, "No, we don't have any planes around here." Says, "All of them are on the East Coast." So this is where I learned what power was. He picked up the phone and called the chairman of the board at TWA and says, "I got a man that needs to be in San Juan tonight, and he misses the last connection out of Miami about 30 minutes. Anything you can do?" Chairman of the board says, "Plane will be waiting on him." I got on a plane with a bunch of mad people. Quit my job with Linton. Everybody thought it was absolutely crazy. I developed a marketing program using direct mail to develop sales leads for salesmen. Well, I developed a program where we furnished every one of our salesmen 10 new sales leads a week that they had to call on to give a report. Well, I started talking to some of my friends at the other competitive companies like IBM and Remington and Smith and about using my program. And all of a sudden, I had more clients I knew what to do with. In less than a year, I had 150 people working for me in New York City. So I quit and came back to Texas in my 40s to retire. So I opened up a new business after getting bored because I wasn't using my mind, and I operated it for almost 40 years from Mount Pleasant. And at one time I had over 100 people working for me here. And I was consultant for people like Macy's and Lord & Taylor and Bloomingdale's, LLB, Eddie Bauer, Shepler's. I got more active in Masonic fraternity. And in 1991, they elected me Grand Master of Masons in Texas, which is just about the highest honor you get. And then 2 years ago, I was given the Grand Cross by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Alan Shivers had received it, who was governor of Texas. Aaron McCall, who was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and president of Baylor University. People like that were the others that had received it. Nobody with just a bachelor's degree from East Texas. Well, I've been involved to a certain extent with every president since I was there. Some more than the others. I was president of the foundation when we conducted our first fundraising campaign. And fundraising experts told us we couldn't be done because we had never went out to people to try to raise money from them. And they said you can't raise money for a state-supported university. But we proved them wrong. And I think it was because of my background in marketing. I think you can sell anything in the world. I didn't know Bob for a long time, was the alumni of ET, but he and his wife lived in one of the old Army dorms over there. Bob came to work for the Texas Scottish Rite Hospital for Children about 31 or 2 years ago. And he is now, as of last year, president of it. I've been on the Scottish Rite Hospital board. I'm the third oldest member on it. So I have an awful lot of experience to offer from. It's probably the greatest institution I've ever been connected with. I've been a vice president over there for 24 years and on the board for over 30 years. We have an endowment fund of $1.6 billion at the present time. And for the past 15 years, we've had more contributions than we've had expenditures each year. We have a unique situation. The hospital that we had originally was condemned by the city as being unsafe for children. In 1976, we decided to build a new hospital, but we didn't have any money. And we had a man on the board that made a statement one day that if you let me build a hospital like I want, I'll pay for it. Well, he happened to have been a partner with Tom Braniff at Braniff Airlines. He also owned an insurance company. His name was Bill Blakely. And he was also, at one time, U.S. Senator from Texas. But Bill was a little bit of a radical and kind of scared the board, and we didn't know what to say about it. So we told him to give us his ideas, we'd consider them. Well, he came back with a plan for a hospital as he wanted wide halls, big rooms, high ceilings, bright colors. Most of our halls over there are 20 feet wide. So that's a wide hall in a hospital.
Yeah.
And we have floor-to-ceiling windows in a lot of the rooms. And the bid came in at $35 million to build a hospital. He said, I wrote out a check for it. Stay in contact with as many people as possible. I stay in contact with people I haven't seen in years that I've noticed sometime had an influence on my life. This Christmas, I put over 10,000 Christmas cards to mail.
A&M Commerce?
I think it was all positive. It would have been nice to keep it at ET, but it could not have grown without joining a system. It's like an independent businessman. An independent businessman can be successful and make a good living, but you've got to be with a big organization to really do good. You know, that's the reason I merged 3 companies together, is to have more power. And that's what it gives you. When you tell them you're part of the Texas A&M system, everybody knows A&M. But I tell people, you know, it took the legislature and George Bush to make me an Aggie